either you're going to get violence, which isn't going to help their situation, I don't think. Just make it worse.
Can I just ask you a quick
Yes.
question? If Jerusalem was an international city, what role would the Palestinians and Israelis have?
Well, they could still, I mean, I suppose the international city could permit them. There's been various models that I've read about. I mean, you could still have sort of a divided city like they had before, where they still have sovereignty over each section, and they could each have their head of state, their seat of government, in each section for each. I mean, there's nothing to stop that from happening. But theoretically, if you made it a separate sort of state city,
Like the Vatican, sort of.
yeah,
Is a city within Rome.
they would probably have to back away from the idea of having their head of government in Jerusalem. You know, Israel would have to go to Tel Aviv.
Like the Vatican is actually, that whole area is its own city.
Yeah, I know.
So it is in Italy, and so that's what you're saying.
So, so there's various models that I've read about. But the main idea of all of them is that it's going to be a shared space for all beliefs, you know, for all religions.
Right.
And, now, and as I said, the other option is that the Palestinians say, okay, we want a one-state solution and start lobbying for sanctions. I mean, that's the next possible step. But something's going to happen. I mean, there's a huge buildup of frustration, I sense. I mean, just the amount of activity that's happened just in the last few months. And something's got to give. You know, you have that sense that, you know, either there's going to be a breakthrough or shit's going to happen. You know, I don't know. Now, I've been yakking I was intending to spend some time on Goldstone, but I'm just wondering whether you want me to carry on for a few minutes or just leave it open for questions.
Well, I'd love to know how Goldstone fits in, because I don't really know too much about him. Can you, in 5 minutes, sort of say who he is and what is the report and as an intro, or does everybody know it?
It doesn't really fit in with what I've been talking about.
Doesn't it at all?
Well, I'll just. Richard Goldstone was appointed by the UN Human Rights Committee to do an investigation for possible human rights abuses in the Gaza situation. That's how it came about. And he went over there and interviewed a whole bunch of people, did an investigation, asked the Israeli people to cooperate. The Israelis didn't cooperate. They wouldn't answer any questions. They wouldn't allow anybody to be interviewed, nothing. So all they got was one side. So they can't complain. In other words, I think they knew what was going to happen, even though Richard Goldstone is a Jewish person. He's a Zionist. He's very pro-Israel, and he's got a superb international reputation as a respected jurist. So he had the reputation of giving an even-handed investigation. So when Israel backs away from that, you know that they know it's not going to go anywhere.
Declaration of guilt.
Yeah.
And
it's amazing to choose a man like that. To choose a man who's Jewish
and it's beautifully written report. If anyone wants a history of the Palestinian conflict, because what he started off by saying, listen, I can't really just focus on Gaza you have to understand the dynamics of what has happened before we can analyze what is really happening. Why did they go into Gaza and why did they do what they did? And so he goes through the entire history.
Can you give me the name of that?
And there's a report by Richard Goldstone, it's called. And I don't have the website here with me, but I...
Goldstone?
Goldstone.
Not Stein.
No. Goldstone.
Yeah.
And there's two things about the report that are interesting. one, of course, is the fact that he found the Israelis and Hamas had committed war crimes in terms of their use of weapons indiscriminately against civilians. Okay.
Equal blame?
Both sides were
Both
blamed.
sides.
Yeah.
Both sides were. What I find more interesting is his whole historical analysis of the problem. And it's a bit of a tome. I mean, it's 555 pages, but if you ever want to get a history on it, it's well worth a read.
Only somebody who has cases
But-
like this.
And interestingly, if you heard my earlier talk in February, I was making a big to-do about this blockade. You see, when Hamas came into power in 2006, that's when Israel really put the squeeze on Gaza in particular, because that's where Hamas was. And they cut them off. They put a blockade on. And then they had a truce in June of 2008. And all of a sudden, they loosened up and goods started to flow. Not 100%, but goods started to flow. And then Israel broke the agreement in November the 4th of 2008 when they made a military incursion to take out some people they were suspecting of doing some tunnel making. And about 6 Palestinians were killed. And then all hell broke loose. And, Hamas, responded. And then the blockade became 100%. Now, when you've got nothing coming in, I mean, no fuel, no electricity, no food, no nothing. I mean, obviously a need for a bad situation. And the rockets, the Katyusha rockets, the homemade rockets started to fly. And then finally Israel got fed up and they went in December with their military operation and killed 1,400 people and destroyed 3,500 homes, and they destroyed agricultural facilities, they destroyed everything in sight. And when you read this paper, you really realize that, there's a history. It wasn't just what happened in 2008. There's been a concerted attempt by Israel to suppress the Palestinians generally and suppress Hamas in particular. And it's just an incredible report. It goes into minute detail. Let me just give you a sense of where some of the conclusions. Oh yeah, they also cut back their fishing limits. They had their fishing limits were 20 miles, and then they cut them back to 6 miles, then to 3 miles, and then to nothing. I mean, they just really, and they bombed, they bombed their water facilities, they bombed their water treatment facilities, agricultural facilities. They wouldn't let them grow things close to the Israeli border, and it's such a tiny state. I mean, it needs every spot of land, and
So
things like
basically
that.
a state-planned genocide.
Yeah.
It's really. I mean, everybody this should be required reading for every Israeli.
Foreign minister.
Yeah, well, that's right.